Hello and welcome to the Beatport podcast. My name's High Class Filter, and on today's show, I'll be talking to DJ and production duo Document 1 about their debut full-length album. I caught up with Matt and Joe ahead of the album release and spoke about the creative process behind the album, the influences behind their distinctive sound, and working with the legendary Shogun audio. Before we get into the interview, I'm starting you off with a track taken from the new album. This one's called Shut Down, featuring Takura.
Beatport podcast.
Some things you just cannot hide. Some things you have to settle with your pride. Do your thing, link up on the other side. You can live to fight another day. Face your fear, you just have to decide. Watch how unite, they cannot divide. Do your thing, make you live your life. No matter how you try, you can't run away. Are you gonna stand and be counted? Or are you gonna simply lay down? Prove them wrong, all those who doubted. You have to shut them down. So are you gonna stand and be counted? Or are you gonna simply lay down? Prove them wrong, all those who doubted. You have to shut them down.
Simply lay down. Prove them wrong, all those that doubted. You have to shut them down. Shut them down. No matter how you try, you can't run away. Shut them down. No matter how you try, you can't run away. Shut them down. Try, you can run away. I said, shut them down. No matter how you try, you have to shut them down.
You're listening to the Beatport podcast with me, High Class Filter, and I'm joined now by Document 1. Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. You alright? Doing good.
Yeah, good. Thanks for coming on the show. So you're just about to release your debut full-length album.
Yeah.
Congratulations, first off.
Thank you.
How does it feel to have it out there in the world?
It feels like a long time coming, don't it? It's really, we were just talking on the way down how sort of chuffed we are that we're actually at this point and that we've kind of managed to put it together in the time that we were given and just just how happy with the outcome and
Totally, yeah. It's probably relief more than excitement. It's been such a mission to get it finished and, do all the things that are involved in making an album creatively, but all the other stuff too. So it's a relief. It feels like it's coming out tomorrow, regardless of whatever happens, and it's good. It's a good feeling. We're happy.
Yeah, we are. We're on the other side of it now, so let's kind of sit back and enjoy it, really.
How did you find the process itself of writing the album? Was it kind of very different to how you'd approach any other release that you normally do?
I think it was quite different.
Definitely.
Because more thought goes into it. I feel like our previous releases, being EPs and singles, have been a bit more autonomous. Like, we're just working in the studio and we're doing what we enjoy, and whatever sort of is created by the end of the process in the studio, we go in there nearly every day, every other day, and whatever comes out of the creative process, we pick what we like best. Every so often when it's sort of time to start thinking about the next EP or single, we pick what we think is the strongest. We have a conversation with Shogun or whatever label we previously released on, and you're releasing the music that you've made sort of naturally. It's just come out of the process, whereas with the LP, there was a lot more talking than there usually is when we're making music. It's drum and bass. We usually just make some drum and bass, enjoy it, and certain things will come out, certain bits of music will get released, certain bits won't, and whatever happens in the studio, you sort of, I don't know, it's a natural thing, isn't it, writing music? Whereas with the album, you consider everything a little bit more. So I think we spoke a lot more about the music.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot more conversations about ideas that we wouldn't normally explore, and just like how can we kind of keep it in the realm of what people know us for, but take it that step further that that an EP doesn't necessarily give you, or a single obviously definitely doesn't give you. I think certainly for me anyway, like the stuff that we wouldn't normally touch on kind of made us go back with a bit of a fresh outlook on the other stuff that we had maybe started, or the sketches that we had, and we just wanted to be a bit more free with it, as well as having these conversations like you say about where we can take it and sort of how we can spread it out and tell the story a bit better of over sort of an hour or 45 minutes, whatever the album is. It's like, how do we sort of just make it more interesting for ourselves and for the listeners?
I think Matty's touched on a really important thing, because that's another big difference. Not only kind of the things you consider and the things you talk about in the conversation, it means a little bit more, but also the freedom, what Matty's just spoken about there. You have a lot more freedom with a bigger piece of work. With a single, a double A side, say you've got 2 tracks to say what you're trying to say to the listener, and there is that, you sort of feel a responsibility, I think more so in dance music than other genres. It needs to connect with the people that are already listening to your music, and you only have 1 or 2 chances with a single, and maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 with an EP. With an album, we suddenly have this freedom to go, well, let's make a percentage of this album a bit more weird for us, or a bit different, or something that people who are familiar with Document One or listen to our music or come to our DJ sets, they might listen to it and not like, but that's okay, because there will be a proportion of this album that they expect, that kind of satisfies their expectations. So there might be 5 or 6 tunes that sound like Document One, there might be 5 or 6 tunes that sound a bit different for us, and that was a nice freedom to explore, I think. So that was another difference, a big difference to previous releases we've done.
When we first had the conversation with Shogun about making an album, I think me and Joe were quite not nervous, because that's quite a strong way of putting it, but like we'd never done an album, and our sort of formula was EPs and singles, and we had kind of had this sort of like, I don't know if we're ever going to be ready, and I don't know if people are sort of, the market and all the rest of it for albums I don't know, we were just really on the fence with it. And then I remember one conversation we had with Ed Friction, and he kind of just sort of flipped it for us and sort of said, it's about how you tell this story, and how it's something that you haven't done. I don't know, it just made us look at it a completely different way. And as soon as that was done, it was like, wow, we can really sort of stretch our legs and do something a bit different. And that was really inspiring for me and Joe to kind of, once we started getting into it, we were fully into it, because we were sort of so reserved and apprehensive about it, and just not. We weren't sold on the idea at the first sort of.
We've resisted doing an album for years. We've been asked to before by certain labels, and we were in our comfort zone, I think, with singles and EPs. You know, if an EP doesn't go well, you move on to the next one, and it's something that passes by much more easily. There's much less responsibility as a musician with smaller releases, if you like. The album was, we have resisted, and like Matt said, a few conversations we had with different people on the label, and we really came round to it. And to be clear, we're not talking about us doing like experimental and experimenting with sound and doing things that are different and stuff. We're not talking radically different. This is a drum and bass album. Like, every track is 170-ish, you know, every track is drum and bass orientated. We're talking about experimenting within the context of our music. So for us, we probably listen to the tunes that are a bit different and hear the differences much more than the listeners. They'll probably hear, for us, we're going, well, this is a much more kind of deep drum and bass tune or a liquid tune that we wouldn't usually. For other people, they'll probably just listen to it and go, it's more drum and bass, it's more Document One. The differences are probably much bigger for us, much more dramatic. It's probably mostly in our head, but I think, a long story short, really different process to any other project we've done before. Really different.
I think listening through the album, for me, the vocal tracks were the ones that really stood out, and I think that's a very different thing for you guys as well, right? Yeah. So was that a very deliberate thing to be like, okay, on this album we're going to try and work with more vocalists, MCs, whatever it was?
Definitely.
From the get-go, really. We had ideas of, some stuff didn't take as well as others, and then some stuff came together super last minute.
Something we want to pursue a lot more as well. So this was a good opportunity for us to try working with vocalists and come from a more harmonic and melodic perspective and write songs and a slightly more traditional music take on music, you know, like we'd sit down and write some harmony, write some chord progressions and send things off to singers and talk things through, and a much more songwriting approach on some of the tracks on this album. Really satisfying thing to do, really fun and quite new for us. In the past, if we've had vocal snippets in tunes, it's basically been samples, which is it's the reverse. So you wade through samples, and whether they're cleared samples or not, or packed or this or that, or acapellas of big tunes or whatever, you trawl through all these things, you find something that melodically you quite like. Hopefully you quite like the lyrical content as well, but you're lucky if that happens. And then you take that melodic top line and you reharmonise it. You write to that. That's sort of pushing you as the songwriter into where you go. Whereas this was the other way round. We start with the chords, we start with the song, and then we get a singer involved. Either the singer's there working with you on it, or you've at least started something and passed it to them for them to write to. So it's the exact opposite way round to other tunes that we've experimented with vocals or whatever. These are real top lines. It was an absolute delight to work with all these vocalists, wasn't it?
Did you prefer to take a kind of collaborative approach with the vocalists, and in terms of the songwriting, was it kind of like a 50-50?
For sure, we weren't going to touch any lyrics, were we?
No.
That's their job.
We even had like demo-itis, I think, of a couple of tracks where we were like, we'd sat on them for a while and we'd lived with them, and we'd had guide vocals from, you know, just something like a little snippet that we would work with just to get the vibe going or whatever, and then you can't possibly imagine what it would be like. It's like a little baby, you've lived with it for like months, you're like, I don't even know if this track's going to suit this vocal, and then the guys that came back and delivered on those tracks, it was just amazing, you know, really, I don't want to say emotional, but it was quite a like wow moment for me and Joe with a couple of these tracks. It's just phenomenal, really cool. Like how they came back, like the work rate and like the effort that these guys put in was amazing, and like the thought and detail and harmonies and all the stuff that they had done. It was like that's what drives us, and that's what's amazing about working with somebody who's kind of like, me and Joe get it all the time because we work together, because we're both constantly inspiring each other to do one thing, or we help each other out with another part of the songwriting process. But when you have somebody who's equally a part of that in their own way. It just eggs the whole bit of the process that little bit further and takes you into an area where you're like, this is really quite amazing. I think we were really
it's
happy.
like a different track altogether once you finished it, and the final vocal is on there, and you feel like you're cheating. You're like, oh shit, this vocal's so sick, man. Like, it's made what we thought was an okay tune that we wrote, and now it's amazing. Because to be honest, we certainly didn't play a part in the lyrical side of things. We were working with songwriters that we felt, or vocalists that we trusted them. We requested to work with them on our album because we liked what they've done already. So we were happy for them to kind of, do that side. We weren't going to get involved in the lyrics, and we did have involvement in the melodic side and stuff, and there were conversations and a little bit of tweaking here and there, but for the most part, what they did was what we had, what we got. We kept getting these ideas, and we'd talk, and then we'd send them an idea, and then they'd send us an idea back, and we'd sort of go, that's brilliant, but can you change this and this? But I would say 80% of what all of them did was what was there at the end, and it was so good. It sort of felt like you're cheating. It's like, right, let's just enhance this track to the point where it's so much better than the track was. This is too easy, kind of thing. You could take, another producer could just take this top line, write another track underneath it, and it would be just as good or better. Or you just sort of think, you've done so much of the work here. And that is what a top line does. That's why most music that people listen to has lyrics, and that's what they sing back. They don't sing the bass line back. It was a big luxury. It was really nice. It felt a bit like, it was something we haven't done much before. It was just great. It was great. Yeah, it was a really, really cool thing.
How was it working with Shogun Audio on the album? Like, how much input did those guys have? Did they spur you on to kind of put out the album in the first place?
They were definitely the instigators of starting the whole process. That was quite...
Yeah, they just suggested to us, didn't they?
They were like,
why don't you put out an album?
Yeah.
And
we had a lot of music floating around that was kind of just stuff that they were hearing when we would be meeting up with them, or we'd send a track here or there to some of the DJs or whatever. They got wind of how many tracks we had knocking around, and they're like, you know what, let's just sort of draw a line under this and go, let's do this album. So they were really instrumental in kind of starting it and getting me and Joe on board with, like, we can actually achieve this in the time frame we were given. So that was, yeah, they were massively, like, super big hand to us for, like, you know, getting the vocalists and looking at it from a sort of A&R perspective and giving us ideas and spurring us on as well in the times when we sort of thought that, you know, maybe we couldn't do it or whatever. Like, there was a lot of help all round for them. They were amazing.
Yeah, they've been a really good, brilliant support. All the guys at Shogun had an influence on the way this album sounds, actually. Like, we had so many discussions and meeting up with them, playing bits and talking, and they had suggestions with all sorts. The creative process, they were actually quite involved. It was really cool. They never overstepped the mark or made us feel like, they were never pushy. They were encouraging, and you know, when you're talking to people like, you know, Keir and Friction and these guys, it's really good knowledge. They're really, they know what they're talking about, and it was great to have that guidance from them. And then on top of that, they helped us. We spoke through what vocalists we would want to use and blah blah blah, and getting in touch with them. So they played a big part in actually making it happen. So they helped us source vocalists, chat to people, talk, you know. But on top of that, they were there to sort of make suggestions, and they even helped us at a point where we had way more tracks than what are on the album. They even helped us decide which ones were stronger, and they never ever forced us to do anything or told us anything, but good suggestions and good conversation really helped us, and they were there all the way, weren't they?
Yeah, you get like Friction was really good at sort of, because he'd be playing certain shows and he would say, I've played this tune this weekend and it went down well, but I feel we should do that, and maybe you should arrange that a little slightly different, and just an idea. Like, he's sort of gently sort of guiding you to say that would have a better reaction if it was a crowd type of reaction tune. You know, not talking about the sort of softer stuff, but the heavier ones. Certainly Shutdown he gave, and they've got another track called Holy Moly. He was really good with giving us just some tips on sort of, you know, so they were there from the get-go and keen to be involved, which is something that me and Joe were like super grateful to have,
totally,
you know, thrown at us, and we'd take all that advice all day long. So
yeah, if you're a drum and bass producer and you could pick a DJ to be testing your tunes out, I mean, Friction would be right up at the top of the list of almost anyone. What a luxury to have. There was a lot that was easier about this than our average release. At the same time as it being a daunting project and a bigger project and all the rest of it, there was a lot that was better and easier because of the help we got, because of things like that. I mean, we had a lot of things that it was really cool, and you don't usually get this when you're working on dance music, you know. It's quite an isolated experience. We're lucky because we're a duo. A lot of producers are sat quite literally on their own from start to finish writing music. Maybe that's what makes dance music sound great a lot of the time, but this was nice because we had each other to bounce off, but on this time round we had quite a few other people as well. Pete was brilliant help at Shogun as well, amazing throughout the process, and then all of the other stuff that they took care of as well, that idiots like us wouldn't want to do, you know what I mean? Like, actually making this thing into a real record that you're holding in your hands, and helping us choose on, get the artwork together, and just sourcing all of the things that are involved that aren't just writing music. Anything else, they were incredible.
Well.
Yeah,
quite easy to forget how much they sort of put into behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
Yeah, amazing. Really amazing support all the way through. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, document 1, Angel. ECP.
Nah, we can settle whenever we like. Just get to know you before someone else, right? We can settle whenever we like. Just get to know you before someone else, right? We can settle whenever we like. Just get to know you before someone else, right? We can settle whenever we like. We can settle whenever we like. Now, dreams fly when you meet someone you like. You both free and single, so it's arm in arm time. It's only one night, we can talk in moonlight until the sun rises in your grip extra tight. Moon in your eyes, hand placed in mine. Walking wherever our feet take or decide. You look at me and smile, is this real? I deny, cause I know when I wake up you'll no longer be by my side. We can settle whenever we like. Before someone else, right? Summer can be beautiful, but we've got tonight. Just hold me close till we say goodbye. I said, come on, we can settle whenever we like. Just get to know you before someone else, right? Summer can be beautiful, but we've got tonight. Just hold me close till we say goodbye. We can settle whenever we like. Just get to know you before someone else, right? We can settle whenever we like. Just get to know you before someone else, right? We can settle whenever we like. Just get to know you before someone else, right? We can settle whenever we like. We can settle whenever we like. Now, I don't find conversations too often this sacred. You got me laughing like I haven't done in ages. Making me smile the way you hold me got me tainted. I only came to grab a drink and listen bases. Last night in these beautiful locations, but you the beauty I'm lost in on this occasion. Feeling human like we could talk till we ancient. A dream come true till we're parting, so take it, baby. Before someone else, right? Summer can be beautiful, but we've got tonight. Just hold me close till we say goodbye. I said, come on, we can settle whenever we like. Just get to know you before someone else, right? Summer can be beautiful, but we've got tonight. Just hold me close till we say goodbye.
I think something else that really comes across when you listen to the album and something that kind of sets it apart from a lot of drum and bass that you hear is the jazz influences, which I think is something that has kind of run all the way through your work the whole time you guys have been working together, particularly on tunes like Your Eyes, I think, and Midnight as well, is I think it's probably the most obvious one, the interlude. Can you tell me a bit about how those influences kind of worked their way into your music? Like where did that sort of come from?
I've always played jazz piano.
Yeah.
I'm not good. I haven't spent the last 10 years playing jazz piano. I've spent the last 10 years making electronic music, but it's something I've done since I was 10. So I've done it for a long time, and I love jazz. Matty likes jazz. We've got Bassline Smith to thank a little bit as well for the jazz. He was really encouraging when we were releasing on Technique, and we made a tune called Jazz Club, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a B-side really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
For something that we'd put a more heavier track out, and we had sort of thrown this track together that we were like, it's got to be different. It's not really got to sort of be...
We were doing heavier stuff up until that point, weren't we? And I had a bit of an idea, and Matty said, why don't you put some double bass in it and let's make it a bit more jazzy. And that was a funny point really, because just from that little... It was just a bit of fun. It was like, well, why don't we use some jazz influence, because you do that and we've never really done that in our music. This was quite a while ago, and we made that tune, and Bassline Smith loved it, didn't he? And we put it out, I think it was on a compilation, and it did really well, and so we were like, nice, let's do a bit more, and it's something we can do. Matt plays guitar, like I said, I play piano, just about, and ever since that tune we've done a lot, and we do make a bit of harder music. We started making a bit more kind of more liquidy music, but it's easy to build jazz into it. I mean, one of the first drum and bass albums I ever owned was Ronnie Size, and we've always loved him, haven't we? We actually got to know him a little bit when we had the same management, and he's always been a hero of ours, LTJ Bookham. And we're about, 18, 19 years old, going and watching him, and they've been big influences on us. And there's a lot of the jazzy stuff. You listen to Goldie's music and jazz is all over it, so sometimes it's sample stuff that we've taken from jazz music, sometimes it's played in,
sometimes it's a mix of both, where we'd have a sample and we think it's not doing what we want it to do, so thankfully Joe's a good keyboard player, piano player, so he can, we can deconstruct it and work it. We work it in a different way that kind of suits the track. Something like Your Eyes was literally a jazz track. I can't remember the original drop, but it had a section. I remember Joe passed me the project, and it was literally the jazz intro minus the vocal. It was that piano bit and double bass and all that kind of stuff, and then there was like a whole chunk missing, and then there was a drop, and it was not really related, but it was kind of like, the drop's cool, but we'll forget that for now, because this is where the money's at. Like, this is the bit that is the most interesting for me. Like, he's passing me a project, it's kind of like a collaboration every time we work together. So for me, that was the part that I thought, I'm going to take that in this direction and spread out in a more liquid sort of thing, and that's how that came together. And that's often the way. You've got the bits that are there's other tracks where we've had like brass bits or other sort of parts of the jazz world that might creep in, and there might be a tiny bit of a whole 32 bar drop, but the rest of it doesn't really matter, because they're the cool bits that stand out, particularly for us as well. That's the kind of thing that people notice about us, is the jazz part. So
it's funny because it doesn't feel like that to us, does it? No. Other people point out the jazz, but it was a happy accident at the start. It was a quick thing when we were just in the studio. Matty saying something, okay, we'll try some jazzy chords and blah blah blah, and then the next thing we got quite a jazz orientated tune, so we called it Jazz Club to highlight the fact it was a bit jazzy. From that point on, we realised, okay, we're allowed to do this. Like, we're allowed to use this skill set and apply it to drum and bass, so we did, and that was when we revisited things like LTG Booker and the people I mentioned before, their music, and took more influence from it, because we realised, all right, we're allowed, kind of thing. We say jazz, it's jazz influence, it's not that, there's no improvisation in what we do. And jazz is, by definition,
so there's not much jazz,
it's improvisation. So we're lacking, in our music, we are lacking what jazz is. So it's only inspired by, the instrumentation, the Fender Rhodes or the piano or the chords. We've got the extended chords of the 7th and 9th, 13th, whatever. And we've got progressions that you hear in jazz. But it's still very basic, and there's no solos, because we don't want to do that. We don't want to be a jazz drum and bass outfit necessarily, but it would be nice to pursue it more at some point on a particular project. We would love to work with a double bassist at some point. We'd love to try and play some of these tunes live, and that would give us an opportunity to actually improvise and do what is jazz. Harmonically or timbre wise, it's a fun thing to play with, and it fits. Other DJs from a long time ago have proved that jazz works with drum and bass real nice, and it just sounds good. So it's an avenue we went down by accident, and we've just continued to because it feels good.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up all of those kind of older producers that used to have those kind of sounds in their music. And now that you mention it, it's something that you used to hear a lot of Maybe it's just the fact that it's not something you hear so much of now that makes it stand out a bit more.
Totally. I think it came because, like you say, when we first touched on Jazz Club, we were making harder music, and harder drum and bass was everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think it was almost a bit of a breath of fresh air, and that was the track that kind of made everyone go like, oh, like that's a little bit different. And then we've, like Joe said, we've just explored it naturally because it's fun and you have a bit.
It was just a realisation. Oh, okay, like the drum and bass scene's going to let us do that. We felt like it was a silly little B-side thing that. It turns out like it really changed our direction quite a lot.
It didn't have to be like so hard all the time, did it? Do you know what I mean? Like, because we were sort of so in a space of everything we write has to be a certain level of production, and we were so sort of set on that, and it was all about hard music and trying to find our niche in that market that was going on when the kind of neurofunk sort of thing was kicking off and just expanding, and we just done this thing for fun that was like the flip of that, really, weren't it? It still had elements of heavy bass line bits in there, but it was like we just did that as a thing because we needed to throw together a B-side really quick, but that was what paid off. It's just the fact that it's more interesting, more laid back or whatever, and it's that kind of fresh air, I guess, for people.
I'd love to do something that we felt was jazz at some point. Still drum and bass, but that qualifies. I mean, I was listening to jazz long before I listened to drum and bass, and like I said, like Represent is one of the first things I had in drum and bass, but I was listening to Coltrane and Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk and Charlie Parker because I played piano before I ever touched music on a computer, and it seems obvious when you look back now, doesn't it? It's like we never got your guitar involved. It was like me and Matty separated
our past.
It's like Matt plays guitar and I played piano, but when we came together to make electronic music, this is a separate thing. We keep this over here, and we don't, and it was like, I reckon we probably got through about 4 or 5 years before we really started using it, and now for the last 5 years we've been involving it a lot more because we just sort of didn't, I don't know, it sounds silly to say, but we sort of didn't realise, okay, we're making this heavy bass orientated dance music. People in a club don't want to hear some jazzy chord progression. They don't want to hear 2-5-1s and all this. Like, they're not interested. So once we realised we could, it was like, cool, like, let's do this all the time. It's really fun. And our music is gradually getting more and more melodic. And
it's given us a pass, hasn't it, really, to fit it within whatever sub-genre we decide to tackle at that time. So, like, for example, for this album, there's many different sub-styles within the context of the album, but we find a way of fitting that in there.
It's an anchor.
It's a natural thing for me and Joe to do.
It's the one thing we can do now to keep the listener going, oh yeah, this is them, this is Document One. It's nice. Again, it's another thing that feels a bit like we're cheating at music because we spent so long trying to work on sound design and synthesis, and we love that stuff, but that's all we were doing was trying to, we need to sound as good as Icicle or Noisier or blah blah blah, and then one day we're like, oh, you can just put some nice minor chords with some 13ths in there, and suddenly the intro's done. Oh, and we don't need like the most spectacular sound design on the drop because we can do that. And it's like, what, you just played those chords on a Rhodes VST. It took like 10 minutes, but for other producers that would be hard because they haven't learned, they haven't had the guitar lessons or the piano or whatever. You know, we've been lucky in that sense that we played instruments growing up. So, you know, other producers wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. So we take it for granted and it feels easy and it feels like, oh right, that quickly sorts that out. But
I've had people say to me before at gigs, like, where'd you get that sample from and stuff, and like, no, we just played that in, and they're like, oh,
same with the double bass, like we played that on the keyboard,
you know, and it's like it's not like, oh, I know how to do it and I've cracked the code. It's like that's just been embedded in me and Joe since we were kids.
And finally, where can people catch you playing soon? Have you got any plans to tour the album?
Yeah, we got a lot One that we're really looking forward to is the Beatport stage at
Of course.
Mysteryland.
Mysteryland, yeah.
That's going to be really good fun. That's a Shogun takeover.
Yeah,
that's
that's
going
gonna
to be an
that's
absolute
gonna be
blast.
great.
We're looking forward to that.
Liquidity Festival and Let It Roll.
And then-
We're off touring in Australia for
Amazing.
And New Zealand as well.
And New Zealand, we got 4 gigs in each, so there's lots going on there. Got quite a lot of gigs. Once that's all over, once this festival season and this tour is over, in a month or 2, then we've got a bit more going on in the UK. Doing the club circuit, Bristol and Brighton, and we got quite a lot. Yeah, lots of gigs. If people go on our socials and that, they'll be able to find where we're playing. But we're touring the album quite a lot. You know, I mean, you'll hear most of the album. If there's certain tracks that probably wouldn't go down too well, they're a bit more for the headphones than the dance floor, but you hear most of it at most of our shows, so
Totally.
come down.
Beatport Podcast.
Thanks again to Document 1 for joining me on the show today. Their new self-titled album is out now through Shogun Audio. For the rest of the show, I'll be getting into the mix with some of my favourite new drum and bass releases, starting you off with a new one from Enei. This one's called Widowed. This track's taken from the latest release on one of my favourite drum and bass labels, Onset Audio. This one's called Script, and it comes courtesy of a Bulgarian producer going by the name of D Mental. That's all I got time for on today's show. Another big shout out to Document 1 for joining me on the show today. Remember, their new album's out now. I'm leaving you with a new track from Monty and Visage featuring Ben Abu. This one's called Limbo and it's out now on Alex Perez's label, 1985 Music.
Beatport Podcast.